Hey there, this is Kat, and thank you for joining me in my live podcast as I have a very special guest joining me today. But before I go into the special guest, let me just again, for the sake of if you're joining me live, please drop a comment below. This is all about engagement. Drop a comment below. Let me know you're watching me live and where are you watching from. And then if you are on the rebroadcast, the replay, just say R and then where are you tuning in from. If you have any questions in regards to what we're going to be discussing today, please drop those in the comments. So whether Rusty or I answer them immediately on live or whether we answer your question later. So I know that you want answers to your questions, right? Of course you do. Okay, so let me introduce my guest today. Rusty Gaillard is a leadership coach, and Rusty formerly worked worldwide as a director of finance with Apple and some other big high names. Apple Rusty blends his decades of hands-on leadership experience with life coaching principles to help leaders be bolder, make more decisions, and more action oriented activities and things that will relate to them and help them progress as their leadership role. Rusty is also the author of the best-selling book Breaking the Code and is sought after speaker, trainer, and personal coach. I am so excited to bring Rusty on board, and he's going to tell you all about the incredible things that he does, as well as probably a little bit about his book and some of the things that he does to help businesses grow. So let me bring on Rusty. Hey, Rusty.
Hey, Kat, thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. So, okay. So, what I would love for you to do is if you could share a little bit of background to my audience of who you are and some of the things that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you described a little bit. I worked at Apple. I worked there for 14 years, and I decided to leave about 4 years ago. And as I was leaving, a good number of people kind of looked at me like, "Why would you leave Apple? You know, it's a great company, and it was a great job." And not everybody understood that decision to leave. But I had come to the point where I wanted to do something that was more aligned with the kind of how I wanted to live my life and the kind of contribution I wanted to make. I think a lot of people reach this point where they are thinking about, like, how do I actually want to impact the world, right? It's like we invest so much time and energy in our career and in our work, and we strive for so long to reach to this point. And I'd kind of reached that point, and I was like, yeah, but it's not everything that I thought it would be. And so I wanted to get to the next level for myself. And that's how I ended up leaving Apple to start my own business as a leadership coach.
Okay, fantastic. I think, you know, what's funny is my story is very similar to yours. I think what happens with people is I think it's a combination of things. I think it's maturity. It's again, what are your values, right? What your values are, and then what your priorities are. Because for me, I feel like kind of the same thing was happening with me. I was in corporate America for 27 years. That's a long time. And thought I was going to keep growing that, you know, corporate ladder. And I just got to a point where politics and a lot of things that interplayed that I just didn't agree with, right? It just didn't, it rubbed me wrong or it just didn't feel right. So I always tell people I haphazardly became an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's the sometimes things rub you the wrong way. And, you know, I didn't really have that so much, but I did have this sense of I'm putting so much of my time and energy into work, but I work at a big company. And honestly, if I didn't show up one day and never came back, you know, there'd be a little bump in the road, but it would not really impact the company.
Right.
You know, they
Right.
would go on just fine. And I said, you know, part of, again, for my values, like, well, how do I make an impact in some way that I feel really good about?
Yes, and I agree. Okay, so some accolades you have on your website that anybody joining us today is eventually going to discover, because we're going to share those links with everybody, is that you're schooled as a rocket scientist. Tell us a little bit about that, Rusty.
So my college degree is as an aerospace engineer. And I mean, the kind of the the bookends of that story is going into college. My dad, who was an English major, was really wanted me to have a liberal arts degree, like English.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, fine, sure, I'll do that. And I got to school and I looked at the course catalog, and I'm old enough. This was definitely not online. There was no online back then. I got the book and I went through the course catalog, and all the courses I wanted to take were in engineering. So I took them. I loved studying engineering. We did great projects. One of my senior project was to build a self-driving car. Now, this was a golf cart,
Nice.
not an actual car, but in the very early days, well before you saw these on the road. But I just loved engineering. So I got
Yep.
a job as an engineer. And my first job, I worked at General Electric as an engineer. And in my first job, I could sit in my cube all day. And if I did not get up and walk out of my cube, I could literally not talk to anyone all day. Because, that's kind of, engineering tends to be pretty solitary, and you just dive into your work. And that
Yep.
just wasn't for me. And I knew that pretty quickly. So as much as I loved engineering, I started moving away from it, more towards operations and finance, which is what I did the rest of my corporate career. So started off as a rocket scientist, but just didn't stay there.
Awesome. And then you also play in a rock band, right, Rusty?
I do. Well, so, this gets to, when I talk about leadership, I think, we often think about leadership in terms of leading others, but it starts with leading yourself.
Yep.
And for me, I had the opportunity to play one song in a rock band. I'd never done that before. And it was a thrill. It was just so much fun. And so I had this dream to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know how to do it. And so the only answer that I could come up with was, why don't I start a rock band? I knew a few
Nice.
people, and I had to reach out to find a drummer, because I didn't know a drummer. So I reached out and found a drummer, and we got a little band together, and it was a blast. We just had so much fun. It's nothing formal. The
Yep.
biggest performance we did was my backyard for my birthday party,
Nice.
but we just had a great time.
Awesome. Awesome. See, so I pointed out some things that I found interesting on your website. I always like pointing out the little things that people may or may not point out or talk about, right? Okay, let's talk about the nitty gritty, because you want to talk about how you can create success as a leader with personal values. Would you want to expand on that?
Absolutely. So many of us come into work, into our work lives, and there's a couple of things that happen. Number one is we think we need to be a certain way at work, right? A lot of us have a work persona, and then we have a home persona. And it's
Yep.
like, who you are at home is not really who you are at work. And I think that's a problem. Because especially in today's world, where we're switching back and forth in context so many times, especially if you're working from home still, some people are, you go back and forth between interacting with family and interacting with work, and it can get a little confusing about, how am I showing up and who am I in this place? So the consistency across all of this is to think about and articulate. And I actually want you to write down, what are your values? What's important to you as a person? Because that will guide not only the kind of work you do, it can guide that, but even in the work that you do, if you don't change your work, how you do that work, how you show up.
Right.
Fundamentally, all the decisions you make are guided by what you believe is true and right and important. And that's where your values serve as that foundation for who you are, how you show up, and how you make good decisions.
Right. And that makes sense. Go ahead. What were we going to say? Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I think, both of the story that you shared about leaving the corporate world after 27 years, I think you said, and my example as well of leaving the corporate world, I think fundamentally those were values-based, right?
Yes.
Like for you, there was a little bit of friction. And for me, it wasn't so much friction, but just the sense of, a value of wanting to make an impact and wanting to connect with people and wanting to live into that. So values can steer you away from something where there's conflict, but they can also
Yep.
steer you towards something where you've got a desire to more deeply express that value.
So when you're helping people, are you helping the leader of the team? Are you helping the team? Who is in effect essentially as part of this mix?
Yeah, mostly I work with the leaders of the teams.
Okay.
But again, when we talk about leadership, everybody's a leader. Everybody has an opportunity to be a leader. I don't associate leadership with a position. I mean, of
Yep.
course, if somebody is the head of a company, right, that is a leadership position, but that doesn't mean they're a good leader. So
Right.
whether you're the head of the company or whether you're an individual on a team wanting to advance and get to the next level, leadership is what makes the difference. And how you show up based on your values matters, right?
Yep. Oh
Are
no.
you, yeah, like, are you
I,
coming from a place of authenticity and honesty and
yep.
work ethic? Like, all of these are values that make a difference and can help propel you as a leader.
Right. And again, I'm a big believer in that because what you're talking about is even in the environments we have been in, right? So in the environment where I was in, the different environments where I felt like, some of the things they were doing went against the grain of what I would do, right? And
Mhm.
so where does that come from? It comes from the top come down, right? It always does. It always comes from leadership come down. And then it's incumbent, the leaders expect the team to participate or to agree or right to facilitate. So
Mhm.
that's where there's the disconnect. Typically, if there's no communication and people are told or asked to do different things, right, then there's a disconnect. But then there's also a misalignment. And that misalignment is what creates these kind of toxic environments, right? The water cooler environments. I mean, we could go on and on and on about how, the effects of leadership top coming down and how what does that create in an environment,
You're
right?
totally right, Kat. But I want to offer kind of a contrary point here, which is one of the things that I really believe is each person is 100% responsible for their experience of what's going on. So if you're in a job and you're unhappy with it, you're responsible for dealing with it. You may not have created the environment. You may not, like, maybe you have a boss you don't get along with, or maybe, as you described, Kat, there's a top-down culture that's going on that you don't like. But each of us, like, you fundamentally have a choice. You can
Mm-hmm.
say, I'm in this environment and there's nothing I can do about it, and I'm just stuck and it sucks to be me. Or you can have it make a different choice that says, look, I'm here. I'm going to do everything that I can to make this a positive experience, to grow from it, to learn, to make an impact for the people around me. So,
Yeah.
the way I articulate that is just 100% responsibility, taking
Yep.
100% responsibility. So I'll use an example, right? And so you'll often hear about workplaces and this idea of psychological safety. Like, is there psychological safety for me to really speak up and say what I believe? And of course, the environment that you're in, what the top down message is, of course, those things have an impact. And if you really are taking 100% responsibility, you find that psychological safety within you. You find
Mm-hmm.
that inside and say, I'm willing to speak up. Hey, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but this matters to me, right? Are my values clear enough? Do I have the internal strength? Do I have the resources so that I can stand up and be who I am and in this environment and show up as your best self? Because you're going to be most successful that way. You're going to be happiest that way. And you'll learn very quickly. If in fact there's a big disconnect between you and the environment that you're in, you'll figure that out and it gives you the opportunity to move on.
Yes, I agree. I think probably the biggest sounding board that we hear or see today is that employees do want to be heard. They do want to be
Mhm.
heard, and they also don't want recourse from being heard because that's typically what happens in your typical corporate America, syndrome, in that the corporation thinks, well, we don't have to deal with this. Let's just get rid of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
for
that's their
sure.
go-to.
Yeah, and that may be the go-to. And I think that's why it's incumbent on everybody listening to show up. right? To
Yeah.
not wait for someone to say, we want to hear you, but to speak up, to be forthcoming, not to, because if you're waiting, you're passive. If you're
Yep.
doing something, you're proactive. And we all know that the way to progress in life in all ways is to be proactive.
Yep. No, absolutely. So what are some of the common challenges that you encounter with the clients that you work with?
Yeah. I mean, the common ones really all center around blind spots, right? Things that people don't
Okay.
necessarily realize that they have, but
Mhm.
they do. So one really big one is this idea of, if I just work hard, then that's all I need to do. That's going to be my path to success.
Right.
And I will say, like, if it's your first job, yeah, you got to work hard. But the further you progress in your career, it's not just about the working hard. It's about the things we've already been talking about: speaking up, sharing your opinion, having an opinion so that you can voice that when somebody asks you, but you can also share that opinion proactively,
Yep.
building relationships with people. When you think about leadership, leaders are people who have relationships with others. They communicate well, they have an opinion, they set a direction.
Yep.
All of these are kind of foundational skills of leadership. And so as you progress in your career, it's not just about the work. It's
Yep.
these foundational skills of leadership that are really important. And that is an area that a lot of people miss. They just kind of still have this mindset of, I just got to keep doing the work really well.
Yeah. And so I'm just going to reemphasize what you said because I I run into this all the time. So I'm glad you said the blind spots. I think people don't understand that once you start a business, once you're ingrained in your business, you are so ingrained in it that you sometimes don't even know the questions to ask because you're so inundated, ingrained in your business. And it always, when we're doing social media for companies, that's usually the biggest challenge. Like people are so ingrained, we ask for content or we say, do you have this or have you done this? And they're usually like overlook all these things because they're so ingrained in it that they didn't realize, oh, I did do a speaking event over here, or I did a blog over here, or I did this or did that. You know what I mean? Like they're just so ingrained that the oversight is huge, just
Yeah,
majorly.
and I think it's, when you talk about a small business owner, there is a huge bias towards doing too much work. I've worked with multiple small business owners who are they pick up all the little pieces because the buck stops with you if you own the
Yep.
business, and you don't want the business to do poorly. So you pick up the work and you pick up the pieces.
Hmm.
But the problem is, you don't get from your employees, you don't get from the people around you what you want them to do. You get what you will tolerate. And if you will tolerate them dropping a few little pieces and you picking up those pieces, that's going to go on forever
Yeah.
until you change it. And that one piece right there can be a huge blind spot for
Yeah.
business owners, to be thinking, just to step away and say, what am I doing that I should not be doing?
Yeah.
And find a new process to get that work done.
I love that. I love talking about the blind spot. Okay, so habits that get in the way of real success. So, do you want to talk about new habits that can accelerate progress, or just habits in
Yeah.
general? Because I'm a big believer in habits for sure.
Yeah. So one habit I just want to say is, like, having someone that, well, having a place where you can work on your business rather than working in your business. And I'm sure you guys have talked about this before, but so many entrepreneurs are working in the business, doing the work, but you really need to find a way to step out and work on the business. And so one habit, a very simple thing to do, is to give yourself 20 minutes every week to plan.
Yep.
Just have a planning. What went well last week? What didn't go well last week? What do I need to accomplish this week in order to accomplish my goals? I literally just started doing this, which is kind of ironic for me because this is my coach. I'm a coach and this is my business and so on. But I've always resisted that kind of planning. I would
Yeah.
do it periodically, maybe once a month, but I resisted it until I finally just decided I'm going to do it. And so I sit down in the beginning of the week, sometimes Sunday night, sometimes Monday morning, and I think about, how did last week go? What went well? What were my wins? Did I feel like I made good progress towards my goals?
Yep.
And what do I need to do this week? And I think about it on a weekly basis, and I look at my calendar. I'm like, oh my goodness, this coming Friday, I'm in a full day workshop. That day is not available. So I only have 4 days this week to work on my goals. And so where am I going to slot them in and make real progress? So that habit of planning is a huge one, but it's connected to the habit of distance, because you got to get out of your business in order to plan. If you're in your business, heads down, your email's in front of you, and you're getting text messages and phone calls, you're like, you can't think in that environment. So you need to create space and then take a minute and plan.
I agree with you 100%, because I'm probably better at this at the end of the day, you know, to collect my thoughts and think about, you know, what do I need to cover? What do I need to do this week? What's going on? And I typically do it at the end of a Monday for the rest of my week, because I'm thinking, how do I load my day so I understand what my priorities are? So I'm a big believer in that, you know, reevaluating it. Go ahead.
I think two things to pull out of that. One is know yourself, right? Like, like for me, at the end of the day, I'm checked out. I'm looking forward to family time, hanging out, relaxing, whatever. So it's not a good time for me to plan. So know yourself and just know what's right for you. And then the second thing is what you mentioned is this idea of priorities is, you know, so many of us have, if you have a to-do list, I mean, I've got some checked off on mine, but, you know, I've got like a page of to-do items. And if you've got something like that, it can be really easy to say, how do I prioritize this? I've got so many things to do. What do I need to do first? But it's really the wrong question. Really, you want to think about a question of like, what's going to actually move you forward? And those things need to be your priorities, and you put them on your calendar. Because all of the other stuff, all the responding to emails and all that kind of stuff, like it'll get done. You'll find a way to get it done. But find those times where you're at your best and do work that actually matters during those times.
Okay. And then you talk about the difference between being productive and effective. What do you mean by that?
Well, being productive can be like, hey, I got a lot done today, right? I responded to emails and Slack messages, and you know, some people are inbox zero kind of people. I don't really believe in that personally, because the important work, the things you really need to do to grow your business, they're not in your inbox. So, you know, spending a bunch of time and energy to get to inbox zero, you know, if that's for you, fine. But I don't actually think that that's worth your time and energy, because that's not where the important work is. The important work are the ideas that you think of when you're thinking, when you're planning, when you're being strategic about your business, when you step away from the day-to-day and you say, hey, what do I actually need to do here? And then take advantage of those things. So that is effective. When you make progress on those items, that's effective. Being productive, just getting more done in less time, like inbox zero, can be really productive, but you may never grow your business or accomplish your goals. You just kind of keep responding to the stuff that's coming at you.
Yeah. Do you find that people don't have guidance or have let's say, a primary purpose in what they're doing, are less likely to make right decisions or effective decisions or immediate decisions? I mean, I think what happens is if you can't make decisions, you're ultimately will miss out on an opportunity, right? Don't follow through, you know, whatever. I mean, do you find that to be a lot more relevant as we're so inundated with so many things?
Yeah. In fact, I mean, all of the brain science shows that when you're under stress, you are worse at making decisions. You don't have the same access to the cognitive part of your brain, like the rational, logical thinking, when you're under stress. Like when you're under stress, that part of your brain just doesn't operate as well. And the part of your brain that is operating is the survival part of your brain. And so the survival part of your brain is like, just get all this stuff done so I'm not stressed anymore.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily help you achieve your goals, because all that stuff that is making you stressed may not be the stuff that the work and the connections and the conversations you need to be having to grow your business.
Yep.
So
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you need to get some space away from your business. So I'll give you just a simple example. One of my clients worked at a big tech company, big role there. And he was working all the time. He had a family, so he'd spend time for dinner with his family, but then he would go back to work and be doing email late at night and so on. But through our coaching work, one of the things that came out is he said, I'm in pretty good health, but I haven't seen a doctor in over 5 years because I don't even have time to make it to the doctor.
Mm.
It's like, okay, well, let's talk about that. So we start figuring out, how do we carve out some time for doing some things that were important to him? And I said, well, you can basically get time out of your schedule in one of three places. You can get it out of work time, out of family
Yep.
time, or out of personal time. And he said, well, I obviously don't have personal time. I haven't been to the doctor in 5 years. So that was out. So it's either work or family. He said, well, I'm not
Yep.
going to take it out of family time. So it's got to come out of work. So we started carving some time out of his work schedule so that he could do other things that were important to him.
Nice.
One of those
That's
things, by the way, was playing golf, because he
okay.
liked to be outside. It was social. It was some exercise. So
Yep.
over the course of a couple of months of working together, he started playing golf more regularly. And it got to the point where he was playing golf about 3 times a month on Friday afternoons and taking that time out, leaving work a little bit early to go play golf. So most people, you would say, well, what would happen from that? Well, his performance probably went down. He wasn't being as effective. And it was exactly the opposite. He was more effective because he was making better decisions, because he had more
Right.
perspective. And within about 6 months of the work that we were doing together, he got a promotion. He got a new, bigger job.
Nice. Nice. Nice.
Now, I just think that's a great story, because who thinks that leaving work early to go play golf is going to get you a promotion? And, maybe that's not going to work for everybody, but having the space to get away, to think clearly, and then come back and make better decisions, that is gold.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, I'm going to say this, and hopefully my friend is not watching. He's pretty high up in this manufacturing company, and he's well educated. He's an engineer, and this is his second or third job. But I mean, he's in his 30s, this guy. And so he was talking to my husband one day, and he was like, my husband was asking, "How's your job? How's everything?" "Oh, it's great. I'm bored, but." Do you know what I mean? I'm bored, but it's great. And so he's gotten to a point where he's exhausted any potential for more learning or stimulation, right? To keep him wanting to be there,
Mhm.
And I think that happens a bit with people under bad leadership, right? Because they're not really understanding that, I don't know if you read between the lines, you talk to your employees, but to me that says bad leadership if the employee's bored, but they're like a good asset to the team,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I hear that story, I think, number one, if you're a leader of other people, I hope you're having that conversation with the people on your team, right? Are you engaged? Are you challenged? Are you learning? What is your next career ambition? How
Yeah.
can we set you up for that? Like, those are all, to me, those are the basic conversations you need to be having as a leader with the people on your team. But if you're in the position you just described, where you're kind of wishing that were happening, but it's not happening, I want to come back to this principle that you are 100% responsible.
Mhm.
So pay attention. Like, hey, I'm bored. Do you want to show up and be bored at work for the rest of your career?
Right.
I don't want that.
I don't either.
So do something about it, right? This is,
Yep.
you're 100% responsible. Start talking to your manager, start talking to other people, find opportunity, do something outside of work. I mean, there's so many different paths you can go down, or
Yep.
find somebody to talk to about this, to get help. If you feel stuck, get some support, because there are plenty of people out there, like myself included, who would be more than happy to have that conversation with you and help you crack through that, so you can be engaged and challenged and learning in your job.
Right. Exactly. So the final thing I'm going to ask you about, and I'm a big believer in mentors and coaches, just because, at the end of the day, and any thought leader will tell you this is, you want to surround yourself with people smarter than you. You want to be around people that are going to help you progress and advance, and you can't do these things if you're isolated by yourself, if you're not out in the community, or we can talk about several different types of scenarios. But at the end of the day, if you're that person and like you said, work from home, and you're not exposed to a lot of people, but yet you still have a team, the big thing that I'm a big believer is accountability, right?
Mhm.
Someone holding you accountable, because you can be a leader and think, I can do this on my own. I can do all of that, Rusty. I don't need you. Okay, great. But talk is talk, right? And
Yeah.
actionable items are actionable items. And that's somebody holding somebody accountable.
Yeah. I'm not a huge sports fan, but I really enjoy watching the Warriors play basketball. And
Mm-hmm.
Steph Curry is like, people talk about it as one of the best shooters of all time. And he has a coach, like, one of the best basketball players of all time, and he has a coach. Why does he have a coach, right? Part of it is accountability, but part of it is also the blind spots. Hey, I
Yep.
see you keep doing this. You could be doing this. You could change that to be even more effective than you already are. So finding blind spots, accountability, and the other thing I would put out there is structure.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
like almost everybody does better when you have structure. We talked about planning, forming habits. Well, meeting with someone on a regular basis to talk about improvement, to talk about your values, to talk about where your real value add is in the company. That kind of structure is hugely valuable.
Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
just three simple things that you can get out of that kind of relationship. And I will also add that if you think about it, probably the two most important things that will determine your success is, number one, where you're spending your time and energy. And number two, who's around you. Who are the
Yeah.
people around you who are inspiring you and challenging you and holding you accountable, helping you see your blind spots, supporting you in your growth so that you can become more and lead a bigger and better and stronger company?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Rusty, like, who typically are you working with? Like, can you describe them or help people
Yeah.
understand and relate?
Yep. So I've worked with kind of two main groups. Number one is executive leaders in the big tech industry, which is I came from, when you're having worked at Apple, and I also work with business owners and the owners and CEOs of small business to help them grow their business, because this is fundamentally, your business will never grow if you're not growing, right?
Yep.
So this is about your personal growth so that you can grow a business. So
Yep.
those are the two groups that I work with.
And if somebody had to self-identify themselves, what is going on in their head? What's going on in their life right now?
Well, so these are people who want to get to the next level and are feeling, they're either feeling frustrated because they're not
Yep.
getting there,
Yep.
or they've got a desire, but they don't know how, right?
Yep.
They've got the drive, but they feel like there's something missing and they're spinning their wheels a little bit. So if
Gotcha.
you're feeling frustrated because you're stuck or you're spinning your wheels, you're not making the progress you want to make. Those are the kind of people I love to work with and can really help them get unstuck and crack through to that next level.
Okay, awesome. And then how do people get a hold of you? And then I want you to talk about your book, like have Breaking the
Yes.
Code.
Yes. So you've got I see the banner going here, so you can find me
Mhm.
at my website, rustygaillard.com, or on LinkedIn. My book is Breaking the Code. And the idea behind Breaking the Code is, if you think about it for a moment, if you think about, like, we all have a cell phone, right? And the operating system on your cell phone gets updated about once a month. And you think about, when is the last time you upgraded your own operating system? So this is like, learn something new and apply it so that it is now available to you. It's a new capability that you have in your life.
Mhm.
That's what the idea is behind Breaking the Code, that so many of us have been programmed to think about the world in a certain way, to expect the world to operate in a certain way, to believe certain things are possible and impossible. I'll just give you a simple example. I have a new client I'm working with, and I asked him to really think about, what does success look like for him? He said,
Yeah.
well, how outrageous can I be? And I was like, well, I don't know. What's outrageous? He said, well, what if I could earn $1 million working a year, working 2 hours a week? And I was like, I can guarantee you there are people out there who are
Oh
earning $1
yeah.
million and working 2 hours a week. I can guarantee you.
Yeah.
So that might feel outrageous for you. That might be off limits for you, but it's possible. And
Hey.
so the idea of breaking the code, breaking the operating system, like, that's an operating element of the operating system. I could never make $1 million a year working 2 hours a week. That's impossible, right? That's an element of your operating system, and you got to break through that. Same thing about if you're a business owner, right? I'll never make more than $1 million a year in revenue, or 10 million, or
Yep.
100,000, whatever your number is, it doesn't matter. But everybody has a limit on what they think is possible. We all do.
Yep.
And breaking the code is about how do you break through that? And so that's another part of the work that I do, right? When I talk about people who are spinning their wheels or they're frustrated, this is about how do you break through those beliefs that are holding you back. And so these are some of the blind spots, right? These underlying assumptions, beliefs, stories that we all have of what we think is and is not possible.
That sounds awesome. Everybody should get that book. It sounds awesome. It sounds like a great book, Rusty.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Any other last words before we exit this?
I just really encourage everybody listening just to really set an ambitious goal for yourself of what you want. And then to think about what does it take to get there, and just start taking action. Everybody, you will see this everywhere, that taking action matters much more than taking the right action or the perfect action. So think about what you want, stretch yourself, break the code, and go for it.
And I love that you say that, because, all the time I meet people who are starting a business, and the common thing that they always say is, well, everything's not perfect yet. You know what I mean? When they start a business. And I always have to encourage them and say, it's not going to be. I'm sorry. It's not. So you might as well just get started and let it fall in place, because it will.
Yeah.
I promise you.
Well, after having my business for 4 years, it's still not perfect.
And mine almost 10, and it's still not perfect. It's about, having the be able to be fluid, right? Fluid, and then
Yeah.
have way to wiggle room and to ebb and go as things happen. That's just life. Well, great. I mean, it was a pleasure to have you, Rusty. I thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I will make sure that we drop the links for everybody to connect with you and to learn more about your book and what you're doing. Thank you so much, Rusty.
Thanks, Kat.
Thank you for joining me on today's podcast, live podcast, Stand Out and Grow. And please join me next Monday as we have another special guest. And hopefully you did get a lot of good value from today, Rusty, and leadership. And please check him out. It is so worth your time and energy to just check him out and see what he has going on. And if you need help, reach out to him. There's nothing that's going to be like obscure or bad. If you reach out to someone, just have a chat. People are always happy to chat. So until next time, you got this.